Hey, George.
Hey, John. It's good to hear you.
Same here.
So how are things? How's the state of the universe there in Garrison, New York, in the beautiful Hudson Valley?
It's great. It's a beautiful sunny day here. I guess I should introduce myself to
who are you, John?
the Blogging Heads audience. John Horgan. I'm a grizzled old veteran of science journalism. I guess my only claim to fame is my book, The End of Science, which came out about 10 years ago and won me
a lot of people are really mad about that.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
And now I teach at a school. I mean, this is the irony. I said science is all over, and now I'm teaching at a science and engineering school called Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, and still manage to do a little writing. So how about you?
Well, I hardly ever leave my house. I'm here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I write books about science. I still write for the New York Times on and off on contract. I used to write for them on staff, but lately I've just been completely bogged down doing this book, which I just sent to the publisher yesterday. So,
congratulations. That's great.
It's the first book I've ever written that I didn't actually have to send in on paper, so it's like the publishing industry's caught up to the late 20th century.
Well, I hope you start writing again for the Times, because I always like reading your pieces there.
Oh, well, thanks, John. But, I was thinking that, looking at Science Times today, and just there hasn't been much going on, but, then I suddenly saw this piece that was actually on John Tierney's blog, Tierney Lab, about this giant hexagon they found on Saturn.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so what do you think of that?
I think this obviously illustrates my thesis that science is over, if this is the biggest science story we have.
But I was thinking the opposite. I mean, if there's a hexagon on the moon, I mean...
It is pretty strange, I've got to admit. I just looked at the picture this morning.
Usually when you see geometry somewhere, it's like the sign of an intelligence, right?
Well, George, I'm hoping that this is some kind of signal from an alien civilization to us. Maybe they're voting on American Idol. Who knows?
So science isn't really over.
Right.
You can get have you ever played with video feedback?
No, I haven't.
Like you take your webcam and you point it at your computer screen,
and
then you get the screen and the screen and the screen, and it goes around and around, and then before you know it, you get these weird shapes, including geometric things that look like hexagons. So it's probably just some kind of weird feedback.
Yeah, see,
I was doing that, Doug Hofstadter's new book, I Am a Strange Loop. He does video feedback, and he uses this to get into the nature of consciousness and all kinds of wonderful things. But I was reviewing that for Scientific American, and I ended up doing video feedback experiments. So you can see there's one on my website if you want to look at it.
See, you're a real science
journalist. See if there's a hexagon on
George.
There's a hexagon on my website from feedback, so I guess there might be one there on Saturn too.
See, you're such a tech head. I'm a science journalist who knows nothing about technology and real science. My only knowledge is in totally useless things like string theory and cosmology.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, there's an explanation for the hexagon on the hexagon on Saturn on this string theory website run by this character at Harvard named Lubos Model.
Oh, yes, I've been denounced by him.
Yeah, I have too, yeah. And I just got an email from someone saying that I'd been denounced by him. But Lubos Model has a theory that it's actually the Republican Party who's put, the Republican super equivalent of the Pentagon on Saturn. And I don't think he's serious. I think he's kidding. But on the other hand, this guy believes that there's 10 extra dimensions, superstring theory. And there might be 10 to the 500 power universes or more. So, maybe he does believe that. I'm not sure. He's also really, really rabidly against what he calls anthropocentric theory of global warming. So it's a weird site.
So he's on the fringe in every respect.
Yeah, when I was, I spent last fall out at the Kavli Institute of Theoretical Physics in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Nice gig.
Yeah, boy, that sounds great.
To work every day. It was like being an academic. They gave me an office. But anyway, when I was out there, all the superstring theorists were there for this conference, and they were just embarrassed by this guy. They're saying, people like on the web, Lubos modal is like representing superstring theory, and it's making us all look like a bunch of cranks.
Well, I think it just shows that standards have really lapsed at Harvard for a guy like that to
well,
get
to Harvard's
some kind of
credit,
professorship
apparently
there.
he was reprimanded for going a little over the top on personally insulting people that didn't think superstring theory was done science.
Well, I consider it a badge of honor to be denounced by a guy like that.
Yeah,
But
well,
did you notice that last night there was a big debate between two major physicists here in the States about string theory?
Brian
Green
and Krauss, right?
Yeah.
Lawrence Krauss, the physics of Star Trek guy.
Yeah, and you know what I noticed? I just read a little report on the debate this morning.
Oh, what did they say?
And the impression I got was that it was all very jokey and tongue-in-cheek on both sides.
Yeah.
And this just confirms my impression now that string theory, it's just not a serious enterprise. I'm sure there are some people who are practicing string theory who take it very, very seriously, like Edward Witten, who's one of the pioneers, and is responsible for it being taken as seriously as it is. But the whole enterprise now is really more like pseudoscience than real science.
Oh, I don't know. That seems a little. I mean, these guys are serious, but I mean, I'm skeptical about it too, and the fact that you have to have a debate about it is kind of weird. I mean, next they'll be voting
Right.
whether they're a superstring. So that, to me, like you didn't see them having. Did they have great debates? Well, I guess they probably did about relativity.
Well, so the problem, George, the reason that they're having debates about it, and even debates of not very serious kind, is that you can't test this theory. You can't test it, even in principle.
They keep coming up with. I was embarrassed to realize I'd written a story once that was headlined in the New York Times. Scientists finally find a way to test superstring theory, and this guy Peter Voigt, who runs a website called Not Even Wrong, after the physicist Wolfgang Pauli's famous quote that a theory's so bad it's not even wrong. And then he's kind of the main anti-string theory site, right? So Voigt was kind of lambasting me in his book for this headline. And of course, we don't write our own headlines. I say that.
I noticed that. I think what's happening with strings now, and I'm delighted by this, is that there's sort of a sea change against it. So I bashed strings about 10 years ago in the end of science, and I'd written critically about it for Scientific American. And at that time,
at the Copley Institute, as they were as Lubos modal, so that shows that you got in early.
Yeah, and at that time it was still very much a minority position. Now you've got people like Peter Voigt, who's at Columbia, as a mathematical physicist, Lawrence Krauss, and now Lee Smolin has also denounced string theory in his book.
Well, they hated Lee at Copley.
He was there too.
No, he wasn't there, but it was kind of embarrassing. I gave a talk there on superstring theory in the media and about the whole blogosphere and the ricocheting echo chamber effect of, Voigt blogs, what Kavli just puts on a webcast, and then Lubos modal blogs Voigt, and you get this feedback effect. So everyone there felt like they were working in a fishbowl.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. And then one day, I kind of led a discussion on Lee Smolin's book, which I thought was really good. I mean, I don't have the qualifications to judge the merit of his arguments, but I thought...
oh, sure you do, George.
No, I don't. But, I mean, it was rhetorically, it's just really a nice book, and I thought it was very thoughtful, and all these people were condemning Lee, who I think is a really nice guy. And
well, Lee had an interesting section in his book on this very phenomenon, that string theory has now entered the realm of politics. So, you've got the social constructivist scholars who study science and saying that it's more a political than an empirical enterprise. And scientists hate that. But it's obviously demonstrated by what's happening in string theory now.
Well, yeah, if you're having debates and votes on it and things like that. But
what
really made me realize how bitter these feelings were, though, is when we were talking about Lee's book and everyone was condemning him as being a crank, and I said, I don't think, or they were condemning cranks who were going after superstring theory, and I said, well, gee, I don't think anyone would consider Lee Smolin to be a crank.
No.
And it was like this moment of silence, and then one person kind of put up his hand like this, and then they all started laughing and applauding.
That's funny.
And then this got blogged by White.
Right. Yeah, as if the superstring theorists aren't cranks themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm more optimistic than you that this may, amount to something. And these are like the smartest people who didn't go to Wall Street who are doing this. They're way smarter than you or I. And, who are we to really judge this?
Well, George, I thought we should back up a minute. I don't know if the audience of Blogging Heads even knows what the stakes are with string theory. So I just wanted to back up a little bit and say what it's
what
about.
Are the stakes with
put it in context. So basically, you've got two big theories, or sort of clusters of theories, in modern physics. You've got Einstein's theory of general relativity, which explains gravity. It explains the large-scale structure of the universe and the Big Bang and all that. And then you've got quantum mechanics, which is embodied in the standard model of particle physics, and it explains really small-scale events, and it explains the forces.
Like the two most solid theories in science.
That's right. So quantum mechanics explains electromagnetism and the nuclear forces. The problem is the theories don't fit together. So there's been this quest that began with Einstein to find a unified theory to describe all of nature's forces in one tidy package. And superstrings is an attempt to do that, and it's been the leading candidate for a unified theory for about 20 years. And the hope is that you won't just have a unified theory of physics, but that you'll explain things like, where did the universe come from in the first place? Why do we have these laws of physics instead of some other laws? Why do we have the structure of the universe that we find around us? And here you're really bumping into the province of religion and theology.
Yeah, or metaphysics.
That's right.
But isn't it wonderful that adult men and women are paid good salaries to sit around and think about this stuff?
That's right. We get to write about them, and we're paid to do that.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's 10 dimensions is obviously awfully hard for anyone to wrap their minds around, but a lot of the basic theories of physics are pretty weird, too, when you get into them.
That's true. They're weird, but strings, let me just clarify this.
Yeah.
To test, so string theory says that you've got these little tiny string-like bits of energy, and that's where everything comes from, all the forces and all the particles. The trouble is
so small you can't possibly ever detect them.
And also there are almost literally an infinite number of string theories. There isn't just one theory. There are zillions of theories which predict practically everything under the sun. So you've got some proponents of string theory call it a theory of everything. The critics call it a theory of anything because it can predict anything that you could possibly want.
Wouldn't Brian Greene say that? Well, it's still in transition, and
it's been in transition for a long time.
Timetable on these things, and I don't know. I was just amazed at how this. I really liked it back when it was the minority view, and now it's become mainstream. Of course, it makes me naturally skeptical. But.
Well, you know how I'm such a pessimist that I think this just signals the end of the road for physics. They've gone as far as they can, and they've just run into a wall.
Well, my suspicion is that people just aren't smart enough to figure out the ultimate laws of the universe. I was really struck by something I read recently by Freeman Dyson, who's just one of the most wonderful people, as well as a physicist at the Institute for Advanced Study.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite people too.
He basically says, why do we need a theory of everything? We got a good theory of the little stuff, quantum mechanics. We have a theory of the giant stuff, special relativity, and I'm perfectly satisfied with that. And it was more of a pragmatic approach, which is actually heresy among physicists, because they have this kind of idea that everything should fit together into one platonic truth, and it was refreshing.
I think he's right. By the way, I'd like to mention that I've put my money where my mouth is. There's this website called longbets.org that was created by some people associated with Wired Magazine, and people make various bets on technology and science at the site. And I bet Michio Kaku, the physicist, $1,000 that by 2020 no one will have won a Nobel Prize for superstring theory or any related theory. I am absolutely sure I'm going to win this bet.
Well, we'll be eager to see how that comes out. Speaking of Dyson, another thing that surprised me was when he got one of these Templeton Awards, for progress in religion. And,
yes,
he's
the
a
Templeton
wonderfully
Award.
humane man, a deep thinker, but I didn't really get the feeling that he was very religious in a very conventional sense. There's this Einstein kind of God you can talk about, which is basically just a tongue-in-cheek metaphor for the laws of the universe. But is Dyson really religious?
I think he is. Well, Dyson is a funny character because he likes to say things that provoke his colleagues. For example, he wrote a review for the an article for the New York Review of Books recently, in which he said he believed in ESP.
Really?
Yeah, paranormal phenomena.
Oh.
So I think saying he believes in God really isn't that radical compared to some of his other beliefs.
No, that's the next step. ESP to supernatural beings,
and he seems to be annoyed by hardcore religion bashers like Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett. So
yeah,
I think Dyson actually is a good choice for something like the Templeton Prize. But maybe we should tell people what the Templeton Foundation is and what the Templeton Prize is.
Yeah.
So the Templeton Foundation, you and I have been involved in some of its activities, so we know. But for those who don't, the foundation was set up more than 2 decades ago by a billionaire financier named John Templeton, who was a Christian and wanted to build bridges between science and religion. So one of the first things he did was create this prize, the Templeton Prize for, I think it's called Progress in Spiritual Realities.
Religion, and then they came up with a catchier name, I think.
Yeah, and it's
the idea of progress in religion seems kind of oxymoronic, but anyway.
That's right. Well, it's gone to a really diverse group of people over the years. I think Billy Graham won it one year.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa has. Recently, it's gone to scientists like Freeman Dyson.
Yeah.
The physicist John Barrow won last year. And just about a week ago, a philosopher named Charles Taylor won it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him.
Well, I think he's somebody who says that philosophy should draw on religion and spirituality as well as appealing to reason.
Oh, okay. What is spirituality? That's something that just, I don't know, that just always bugs the hell out of me.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
You and I ended up thinking a lot about these sorts of things a couple of years ago when we had a Templeton Fellowship for journalists.
Oh, yeah, when we went to Cambridge, England.
Yeah.
God, it was a wonderful, wonderful 3 weeks.
It was.
One of the high points of my life, so...
It was an intellectual feast.
It was, yeah. Richard Dawkins was there bashing religion and having these really brutal debates with these aging theologians, Anglican theologians, and an intellectual feast, and a feast too.
That's right. The food was pretty good. The booze was pretty good.
Trinity College, and this, where Newton used to be.
The company was great. Journalists from a few British journalists, New Science, scientist, BBC.
It was great, but then when we all got home, you wrote this piece kind of bashing it, and really made everyone really mad.
Yeah, this is typical of me.
You really like to be the skunk in the garden.
I know. I bite the hand that feeds me. Well, I'll tell you, I'll just go over my misgivings. I had just finished writing a book, Rational Mysticism, before I got the fellowship, that was about my attempt to find a spirituality that was consistent with science and reason. So this is something I've been interested in since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I heard about the fellowship. It sounded like a lot of fun. So I applied. And then when I got there, I really started worrying about the agenda of the Templeton Foundation. I learned a little bit more about its leadership. For example, the foundation is now run by the son of the original founder.
Oh, Jack, right?
Yeah, this is Jack Templeton, who's an evangelical, conservative Christian who's donated a lot of money to George Bush. His idea of religion is very conservative and even fundamentalist. the speakers were wonderful at our fellowship, but
yeah,
they really stacked the deck in favor of religion. Almost all of them were Christian. The only one,
but only in the most dilute sense.
well, but they still they some of them were saying that they believed in Jesus Christ as a supernatural figure.
Well, yeah, that was kind of surprising. When what was the name of the evolutionary biologist?
Simon Conway Morris.
Yeah, I had no idea. That was really interesting.
One of the great evolutionary biologists in the world today.
Yeah.
And he believes in, to me, what are completely superstitious claims.
Yeah, well, I remember you kind of cornered him after the talk and asked him if he believed that there was legitimate scientific proof of the bodily rise of Jesus from the tomb to become a supernatural being. And
yeah, and miracles and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I was kind of surprised at that.
I was too. I came away from the fellowship. One of the most interesting parts of it to me was meeting people, because this is true of some of the other journalists as well, who are extremely intelligent and well-educated, well-informed, and some of them are scientists as well, who hold what I believe are basically medieval, irrational views of how the universe works. They believe in a supernatural being who performs miracles and answers our prayers and things like that.
Right. But it's interesting how they're able to, they put that on one side of their brain, and then the other side of their brain they do science, and I don't really think they probably affect each other that well, but it was really educational just to see people struggling with these issues. And I didn't get the feeling, though, that whatever Jack Templeton believes, that any of this was coming across or affecting the program at these 3 weeks in Cambridge. It seemed to be pretty straight down the middle to me.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is it wasn't just the fellowship; it's the whole agenda of the Templeton Foundation. This is it has
to reconcile science and religion, right?
Yeah, it has more than $1 billion in assets now, and I'm not sure if it's reached it yet, but its goal was to spend more than $100 million a year. And it sponsors all these conferences. Something, George, I'm getting a beeping.
John, I lost you.
Yeah.
What happened?
Something happened with my headset. I think the battery started dying on me, so I just had to run and get another one.
Good. I can hear you loud and clear.
Someday we'll have...
it was divine intervention, I think. We were getting a little close to the ultimate truths there. But, I guess the bottom line is I think Templeton's... I think the effort's misguided, but I can see why someone might want to try it, and that it's at worst kind of harmless, and provided us journalists with, as you called it, a real intellectual moving feast. And
I guess what bothered me, as you know, we had there was a bombing in London during our stay over there, and so I don't have a fixed position on religion, so I'm not religious in any traditional way myself. Some of my best friends are religious.
I waver between atheism and agnosticism.
Yeah, I usually call myself an agnostic because I can't, it seems hard to believe that this strange and wonderful world is here purely by chance. But when I look around the world today, I don't see religion as the solution. I see it as more the problem. Not the only problem, but it's exacerbating some of the problems that we have right now.
Yeah.
And so I guess if I think about the evolution of humanity and where we're going and so forth, my hope really, and this is something that I realized during the Templeton Fellowship, my hope is that religion in its current forms, major forms, will eventually vanish.
Well, yeah, that's what people, kind of thought in the 1950s, right? And then instead it's bigger than ever, which is, it's kind of scary. But, however you look at it, it has nothing to do with science. And, we had to do this project that came out of this Templeton, to pay for our, what would they call it? Sing for our supper, I think is what the director.
That's right.
Yeah, and, I did this presentation called Irreconcilable Differences, and they published it on their website. It was published in the Templeton magazine, so completely basically attacking the whole premises of the Templeton Foundation. So that
Yeah.
kind of told me that they're open to, the whole range of viewpoints, and they weren't really setting the agenda.
Well, officially they are. The fact is they did bring Richard Dawkins to our fellowship.
Kind of the
On
token
the other
atheist,
hand, he was a lonely voice.
Well, yeah,
Most of the people there believed that there could be that religion and science are compatible.
Yeah, they believe it, but they didn't seem to bother them that they didn't persuade me, and
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sort of the sheer size of the fellowship, the amount of money that it's spending.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to write this piece to express my doubts. And it turns out that I heard from a lot of people who said that they also felt a little squeamish about taking the money.
Yeah.
So I just hope it gets people to think a little bit harder about.
Well, it made me think, and if anything, I feel like now I bend over backwards to be more critical of Templeton than I might otherwise. Just to, the first thing I did when I got back to Santa Fe was I wrote an essay for the New York Times Science Times section on my Templeton experience, expressing all my skepticism. So it was kind of my way of inoculating myself after, accepting this, all this largesse and this nice.
I remember that piece. I really enjoyed it. Well, one of the suggestions. So the Templetons, people say that they have no agenda. So I even used the phrase reconciling science and religion. They say that's not true.
Yeah.
I think
they kind of backed away from that because they realized that it doesn't play well.
Well, I said if they really want to demonstrate that they're totally neutral on the outcome of all this dialogue, they should give the Templeton Prize, which now is about $1.5 million, to somebody like Richard Dawkins. Or to Steven Weinberg, the physicist.
Dennett's kind of said the same thing, that they should, or I think it was either Dennett said it to Dawkins, or Dawkins said it to Dan Dennett, but something like, if you ever get really hard up, you can, do a deathbed conversion or something.
Yeah, right. Well, that is too late to get the money then,
I think
for it to do
there is
any
a
good.
point that I agree with you. There was something you called the Templeton effect, and
Yes.
this was more like, what effect does it have on physicists who are kind of, maybe unconsciously in the back of their minds, kind of angling for the prize? You think that, well, I can, use God as a metaphor for the laws of physics, like Einstein, who didn't have a religious bone in his body after about the age of, 12 years old, would talk about God, and God does not play dice with the universe. And, he was being kind of facetious, and you can use this as a metaphor, and then, maybe you'll, talk about the anthropic principle, which says that, the universe, that we wouldn't be here if the laws of physics hadn't been fine-tuned by the great maker, and you can allude to this stuff without really necessarily embracing it, and then maybe you'll get this $1.5 million prize. So I can see that could have a subtle effect. Yeah,
I think it's also the effect, as I've seen it working, also can it just gets scientists to bite their tongues if they've taken Templeton money.
Well, yeah.
So I went to a Templeton conference at Stanford a few years ago. This was more on cognitive science, neuroscience, and that sort of thing than on physics. And so on one side there were these scientists like Richard Sapolsky and a guy named Steve Rose from England, and then there were these religious people, and they were sort of talking past each other,
overly
not really
polite,
engaging.
Is that?
Yes, and I talked to some of the scientists. These are not religious people. Most of them were atheists. And they said they didn't want to. They were paid a lot of money to show up at this conference. They didn't want to offend the Templeton people who were organized. They didn't want to.
Well, there's something admirable about biting. But the best science and religion conference I went to was just last fall in La Jolla, California.
Yeah,
that was great because it was like the anti-Templeton. It was the first one. In some ways, you can say that this whole issue of science and religion reconciliation or dialogue is basically would have faded out years ago if it hadn't been for Templeton money. So it's sort of like, he resuscitated this whole kind of non-subject on its deathbed with extraordinary means of support. But this was the anti-Templeton conference, and if anything...
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
I was really envious that you were
Oh,
there.
it was great. It was stacked. And
there.
Lawrence Krauss was there, the same guy who took on Brian Greene on Superstrings, and just like Krauss is fairly, you know, he debates, he takes the con side debating superstring theory, and of course the con side debating science and, you know, like creationism in the schools. He's a big proponent of of evolutionary theory. But you know, he takes a fairly, you know, he was much milder than Richard Dawkins, and, you know, kind of saying, you know, being very respectful to people with religious beliefs. And,
you know, I just have to point up another irony of the whole situation now. As you know, the Templeton Foundation is putting a lot of money into supporting some of these far-out ideas in physics and cosmology.
Yeah.
For example, string theory. They've got something called what is it? The Center for Foundational Questions, or something like that, and they're supporting.
So what's the agenda there?
Well, they're supporting work on the anthropic principle, which you just mentioned, which I consider a version of scientific creationism.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what the anthropic principle is.
Well, the anthropic principle says basically that the universe has to have the structure that we observe, the laws that we observe, the physical constants that we observe, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to observe.
So you either believe it's a fluke, like I do, or you believe it was planned that way.
Well, yeah, so that, you know, to me this is sort of a tautological observation. I don't see how it's even a theory, really. There are different versions of it. The strong version says that the universe had to be this way.
Yeah.
It couldn't be any other way, that somehow the existence of conscious observers is necessary for the existence of reality at all, which to me it's just religion. It's kind of a way of sneaking religion into science. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a real theory, and that, I think, is why the Templeton Foundation is interested in supporting it.
It kind of fuzzes up the science, and, you know, gives this illusion that, oh, well, you know, even science, you know, allows for, you know, all this great mystery.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a kind of design argument.
Yeah.
But there's this new twist on it. Actually, it's not that new, but it's just been getting more attention recently. There's one of the consequences or implications of some theories of physics is that there isn't only one universe.
Yeah.
And this is a consequence of string theory.
Yeah.
The multiverse theory. So the superstring theory predicts not only that there are more dimensions than the ones we find ourselves in, but there are possibly an infinite number of universes out there. And so we find, this is where the anthropic principle comes in. We find ourselves in this universe because this is one that was hospitable to life like ours.
Well, yeah, now string theory's kind of wrapped around and embraced that too, right? With this thing they call the landscape, where there's like this whole landscape of possible different universes, and we're just down in one little niche, and each one has different laws of physics. And
that's right. Yeah, this. I mean, what's fascinating to me is that you know, there's supposedly this great debate between science and religion now, and that implies that there's this clear divide between science and religion. But when you look at some of these theories, like the landscape theory, the multiverse theory, the anthropic principle, the line is very blurry. I think that these theories are more properly understood as religious theories, as branches of theology, than as scientific theories, strictly speaking. Because, you know, just going back to the multiverse theories, there is no possible way we can ever have evidence of the existence of these other universes. So to me, that means it's not really science anymore.
No, you know, to me, it's just a sign that we're up against, you know, you don't expect a dog to be able to, you know, understand even simple Newtonian, you know, bouncing ball physics. So, you know, why should we think that the human brain, you know, which basically evolved so we could eat and avoid being eaten and reproduce, why should we be able to grasp the ultimate laws of the universe? I mean, I think that's kind of what Freeman Dyson was implying, that, wow, we should really be pleased that we can predict what electrons will do, and that we can calculate when there'll be eclipses, and we have a pretty good theory, the Big Bang theory of the evolution of the universe, and we should just be happy, and it would be really kind of strange if somehow our brains were able to grasp any bigger picture than that.
One of the strangest ideas that I've ever heard from scientists, I heard from a guy named Peter Atkins, a British chemist, and he's sort of the most hardcore proponent of this view.
He's a real atheist, isn't he?
He's not only an atheist, he thinks that eventually, he's written about this, and he also told me when we got drunk together once in London about 10 years ago.
You stopped drinking, though, right?
Pardon me?
You stopped drinking? You said that on your blog, that you'd stopped drinking as your evolution.
Oh, yeah, this is 10 years ago.
Yeah, I just wondered if you were keeping that.
So he told me that he thinks science will eventually solve the universe, solve the riddle of existence so completely that there will be no mystery left to existence.
Wow.
That will solve the origin of the universe. We'll figure out why the universe has these laws rather than some other laws. We'll know exactly why life began on Earth. We'll know why life evolved in the way that it did and gave rise to these bizarre creatures who can sit here and chat by video phone and talk about the meaning of life. So he thinks that science will solve everything. It'll explain where religion comes from. It'll explain human love and philosophy and all these sorts of things, which I think is
that's pretty mystical.
Nutty. Yeah, it's a mystical belief in science.
Yeah. Scientism. That's what the the theologians like to call it. The belief that science is more than just this means of human beings kind of cobbling together little systems that help them predict what's going on around them, kind of elevating science to a religion. But it seems that in the end you just got to admit that there's certain things. There's no way you're going to have a theory that says what was before the Big Bang, or why did the Big Bang occur, or why is it this way and not that way. So it seems like you can just accept that there are limits to science, and there's this edge. Maybe.
Well, does that mean that science is reaching its end, George?
No, I don't think it's reaching its end. I think it'll keep going, but kind of on autopilot. But
hey, listen, speaking of scientism, what do you think of Richard Dawkins's book, The God Delusion, or Dan Dennett's book, Breaking the Spell, or
I like
Sam
Dennett's
Harris?
book a lot.
Yeah.
Dennett was supposed to be at this La Jolla thing, but he had to have heart surgery. Apparently, he had very very critical cardiac event, and while he was in his hospital bed, he wrote this kind of wonderful kind of celebration of science and why he could have transcendent, wonderful, spiritual even feelings while being a complete atheist. And in some ways it was the best thing at the La Jolla conference was the fact that they passed out some photocopies of this thing Dennett wrote. And I like Dennett's book better than Dawkins because his point is basically that science should try to study and understand religion, which was kind of the point of that cover story the other week in New York Times Magazine. And
oh yes, by Robin Hennig.
Yeah, that was a good article.
Yes, it was interesting, but don't you think that there's something inherently... So that article was about the attempts of some biologists, particularly evolutionary biologists, to understand the emergence of religion in the same way that we understand the emergence of the eye or the hand as a kind of
language.
Yes, or of language as an evolutionary adaptation.
Religion's like as deeply ingrained almost as language, it seems. It pops up that easily at a certain level of brain development, and that must be why it's just so ingrained. And somehow you and I had some weird mutation so that we just don't get it.
Well, don't you think an explanation, a scientific explanation of religion in those terms, in sort of naturalistic terms, is inherently undermining religion and saying that it's
yeah. I mean,
but the article said that it wasn't necessarily the case.
Well,
that you could believe in these theories of religion and still believe that there's a God, for example.
Yeah. Well, because you can't prove that there's not a God, so I can see how someone could buy that. Someone like a very, very educated religious person, they could say, well, yeah, this is where this came from, but that's still not saying that there isn't a God, and I choose to take the great existential leap and believe that. And
I wrote an article on scientific explanations of religion that came out in Discover magazine last December. This was something that I actually did research on while I was with the Templeton Fellowship, and it went over some of the same ground as that New York Times Magazine article. But what I suggested and provided some evidence for in the article was that the really interesting possible outcome of all this research on where religion comes from and the biology of religious experiences and so forth is that we might be able to develop technologies that can induce religious experiences.
Oh, well, didn't someone do that?
Well, with LSD and so forth.
Well, you had like electrodes hooked up to your brain, right, or something?
Yes, the God machine
to induce a vision.
Something. Richard Dawkins, and this is why I like Richard Dawkins, because he puts his own ideas to the test.
Yeah.
He also went up to Canada, as I did.
Where in Canada is this?
This is in. I can't remember the name of the town. It's way up in the boondocks of northern Canada, and
as we grasp for the name
it's
of the
at a university called Laurentian University.
Oh, sure, that's a good school.
Yeah, so there's this psychologist named Michael Persinger who has invented a machine that some journalists have called the God machine, which supposedly induces religious experiences by tickling the temporal lobes with pulses of electromagnetism. So I heard about this thing, and this is while I was doing research for my last book, Rational Mysticism, and I went up there and strapped on the God machine, which is this kind of helmet that you put on, and it's got all these solenoids built into it, and you go into this little chamber, and Persinger's out there twiddling the dials and so forth. Nothing happened.
Oh.
It was very disappointing.
Oh.
It didn't come close to. I mean, if you want a religious experience, I think the most reliable way of doing that is still taking LSD or psilocybin or one of the psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
But the hope is that I think. Even though the God machine doesn't work, Persinger's doesn't, you can certainly imagine how we can learn enough about how the brain works and how religious experiences are induced. And there's a lot of research on this right now.
So you can
imagine
like with
that it could lead to a God machine that works.
Yeah, but why do you need that? I mean, I get those feelings when I go outside and hike around in the mountains in back of my house. And
well, I think some people do need it. And you said yourself you don't believe in God. What if somebody said, okay, you don't believe in God, but here's a machine. I guarantee you strap this baby on and you will believe in God by the time you're done.
Yeah, or maybe just have like a peak experience, right? Like some kind of transcendental, everything is connected, metanoic.
Right. So I think, this is, to me, what's the really exciting and in some ways disturbing possibility that all this research on religious experience raises, that we'll have this whole array of mystical technologies that can turn everybody into Sister Teresa or Meister Eckhart or...
And they can broadcast this stuff from the cellular antennas and... it's funny. This has just come up in Santa Fe, actually, of all places. They've been trying to put wireless internet into the library, Wi-Fi, like every other library has in the United States. And this group of 3 people came forward and they said, no, you can't do this because electromagnetic radiation from Wi-Fi is controlling our minds and causing brain tumors and making us feel depressed all the time. And this one guy credits electromagnetic pollution with causing him to drop out of medical school and ruin his career. So this is what's so scary about this, the general misunderstanding of science. These are college-educated people. So they go to the city and during a meeting and protest putting Wi-Fi in the library, and then the mayor appoints the leader of the group as a technological advisor for a city committee deciding on introducing technology.
George, I think you should volunteer your services.
I was actually asked to be on the committee, but instead I just kind of mocked it on my... I do this website on Santa Fe politics called Santa Fe Review, and it's an easy subject. You talk about them holding their meetings in aluminum foil tents and things like this. But it was just one of the worst examples I've seen up close of the abuse of people who understand a little bit of science and then distort it into some horrific conclusions.
Hey, I just going back to this whole divide between science and religion. I want to mention one writer and scientist and book that I really admire. So Edward Wilson, who's one of the great living scientists, he's an evolutionary biologist at Harvard. He's an expert on insects.
Yeah.
He helped to create the field of sociobiology. He has written about how evolutionary biology can illuminate human nature. His great passion for the past 20 or 30 years has been biodiversity and conservation.
Right.
And instead of bashing religious people over their heads as Dawkins has done in his book The God Delusion, Edward Wilson has a new book out called The Creation, which is written in I find it a very moving book. I don't think it's one of his. I don't think it's one of his best books, but I thought it was.
I mean, Wilson's a monument.
In a way, it was very mature compared to some of the writings of scientists about religion.
I thought it was corny and naive because, no religious person, the only religious people who are going to respond to his argument, which, I guess is basically, look, here's something we have in common. I'm an atheist, you are an evangelical Christian, but we both, believe that it's important to take care of God's quote-unquote creation and be good stewards on His earth. And, and I can do this as an atheist, you can do it as an evangelical, and then we can, solve problems like global warming.
Well, that sounds pretty good to me.
But it's not going to, the people, is he getting any reaction? I just don't think he's going to.
Well, the fact is that there is now a movement among evangelical Christians to embrace environmentalism. This is sweeping across the world. In fact, I just wrote a review of a book for Discover. It came out, Discover published it last fall sometime, on this green religious movement, especially among Christians, but also among Muslims and Hindus and Buddhist religions of all sorts. So I think, I'm not, of course this preceded Wilson's book, but I think Wilson can sort of help to promote something and expand something that is very positive and is already in place.
Yeah, but these aren't the evangelical fundamentalists who believe that the history of the world is encoded secretly in secret code in the Book of Revelation and Daniel, and that the mark of the beast is the universal product code, and that the world has to come to an end before all the Christians are raptured, and they're not going to buy environmentalism. I mean, think about James Watt.
I guess not. If you're one of the if you're an apocalyptic Christian or religious person of any kind, George?
Yeah, you kind of blinked. I think the phone blinked or something.
Oh, I don't know what that was.
Yeah, cosmic ray.
So if you're an apocalyptic religious person who thinks that that the world is going to end, and that we're already in the end times now. Yeah. You want the world to end. Then I guess you're probably not going to embrace Wilson's message. But there are many religious people who, they might believe in the end times in some kind of vague way. but they don't think it's imminent.
No, and they like to go hunting and go to the national parks, and
sure.
They're not really so sure they're going to get raptured when the thing blows up. So no, you're probably right. Yeah.
Make the best out of a bad situation.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, I hope so, because the fundamental belief of fundamentalism is that there's no such thing as progress, and that it started off at the top and it's been going downhill ever since. So they love entropy and the second law of thermodynamics, and so they like that kind of pessimistic science because it means that the Lord's going to come in and take us all away, or some of us.
I've got to say, let me plug my own program at Stevens. I created something. I run something called the Center for Science Writing.
Yeah, you sort of invented it, didn't you?
It's basically just me.
Yeah.
So I've got this website. I organize events on various science topics, and I just created something called the Green Book Award.
Uh-huh.
We're giving out the first one this year. It's for a book that raises awareness of environmental issues. And the first prize will go to Edward Wilson.
Yay.
And he's coming to Stevens on May 9th to receive the award, and we're going to have a conversation about conservation and science and religion and all these things that we've been talking about.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Do you remember that wonderful profile that Bob Wright wrote of Wilson in his book, Three Scientists and Their Gods?
Oh, yeah.
That to me is one of the best books about all of this stuff that's ever been written. But
yeah, Bob really captured Ed Wilson.
There's a part where I think he describes it as like, you keep thinking when you're having an enthusiastic conversation with him, he's going to say something like, "Hey, let's go out in the woods and build a big tent." Just this wonderful kind of childlike wonder. And I envy you. You'll get to hang out with them and take them to dinner and things probably.
That's what in these for these events, what I really do is I just invite people that I want to hang out with. Yeah. So Wilson is a great example of that.
That's great.
Speaking of events at my school, how about that segue? There's one more topic I thought we could touch on today.
What's going on?
I had an event a week ago at Stevens. Well, this was on March 21st, and it was a debate over something called transhumanism. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, There was this book by Ed Regis. What was that? The Transhumans and the Great Mambo Chicken and the Edge of Science or something?
That's right. People freezing their heads and so forth, hoping to become immortal.
So what's the deal with transhumanism?
Well, it's
sounds
this...
very New Agey, very Santa Fe.
Here we've been talking about science and religion and how science can sometimes take the form of religion. Yeah. Transhumanism is an example of that. So these are people who think that we should embrace technologies that can help us transcend our current physiological and mental limits. So
we already do that,
we should embrace genetic engineering, brain chips that will make us like the characters in The Matrix. Anything, pharmaceutical drugs, steroids. They think steroids are fine if we want to make ourselves stronger. Anything possibly that we can do to make ourselves stronger, smarter, longer lived is a good thing.
That sounds okay.
Yeah, but the problem is that some of their predictions are just, I think, crazy.
Yeah.
So one of the gurus of the field is this guy named Ray Kurzweil. Who's a very successful computer scientist and entrepreneur who now thinks that we're on the verge of becoming immortal.
Yeah.
He thinks it's close enough that he personally, I think he's just a few years older than me, he's in his late 50s, he thinks that he will become immortal himself. And not only that, but he thinks we're on the verge of being able to understand how the brain works well enough that we'll be able to digitize our personalities, our minds, and download them into computers, and so then we'll live in cyberspace and get rid of our bodies entirely.
Yeah. So he's getting Templeton money probably, huh?
Yeah. Actually, the Templeton Foundation is supporting the transhumanists too.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'd like? if they're doing transhumanism and this engineering, I would really like to have like a volume control in the back of my neck where I could turn my hearing down. And there's this dog down the block that's just driving me crazy. But our trans-feline, our trans-canine, I've always thought how great it would be like if I could have a toggle switch on our cats and you could turn them off when you weren't using them and put them in the closet
George,
on vacations.
George, there is such a thing. I'm sure you've heard of. You can get these collars that shock your dog every time that it barks.
Oh yeah, my brother had those on his dogs. It really works.
Technology marches onward.
Yeah. I think it's mostly a good thing. And I want Wi-Fi in the library in Santa Fe.
Well, ultimately, we'll be able to have chips embedded in our brains, and we'll be able to dispense with these computers and the handsets and the headphones and all this jazz, and we'll have a wordless, keyboardless conversation with our brain chips.
Yeah, and everyone will have the same conversation, and it'll all, everyone will be brought together into one great human cloud of consciousness and reach
that sounds far out.
And,
that sounds pretty religious.
Do you know the word metanoia?
I must have stumbled upon that, but I have no idea what it means.
Somebody explained it to me once. It was a science fiction writer, actually, and he said paranoia is this feeling that everything's connected and it's out to get you. Like the Republican Party has put a hexagon on Saturn, and metanoia means that everything's connected and it's wonderful and uplifting, like kind of a Buddhist experience. So this would be electronic, technological, cyber metanoia.
The omega point.
The omega point.
The omega point, that was a term that I think was first coined by, I never know how to pronounce his name. Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah, my French pronunciation is as bad as yours. But yeah, that's the guy. Yeah.
We're all going to merge into some kind of meta consciousness.
That's something Rob's written about too. And,
yeah. And well, cosmic consciousness for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know, that for some reason that doesn't appeal to me very much.
No. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds. I don't even like to carry a cell phone around. So.
Yeah, I'm going on vacation to St. Croix in the Virgin Islands with my family on Sunday, and we're not taking our laptops down there because we're worried that they might be stolen.
Yeah.
But actually, I just want to get away from email and cell phones and everything like that, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Sounds good. I've never tried that, getting away from it, but let me know how it goes.
I will. Okay. So, what do you think? Have we tapped out our topics
that's the week in science,
Do you think that I hope that we have shown people in Blogging Heads Land how exciting science is, instead of doing the opposite and persuading them that science really is only for geeks and you can ignore it without any damage to your overall knowledge of the world.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, science is kind of like what I follow instead of baseball. So it's maybe they could look at it like that.
Yeah, if you have a healthy contempt for it, I think that's the way to keep it in perspective.
Oh, that's you, healthy contempt, huh?
So
okay, John, it's good talking to you.
Yeah, same here. So I guess we just close these things